Astro's Playroom was a lot of things, but the most important one was free. A lot of the time, when a game is advertised as free, that just means it's free to install on your system. In order to actually make any progress in it, you have to take out your credit card and purchase some virtual currency. But this is not the case for Astro's Playroom. No, not only is Astro's Playroom completely free from start to finish, it comes pre-installed on every PlayStation 5 system. This means that not only do you not have to spend money on the game, you also don't have to spend the time to download it. The big advantage to packing in a game like this, with zero hurdles to jump over in order to play it, is that Sony was able to spread awareness of Astro Bot to a massive and previously untapped audience. Stuck on the PS5 launch day waiting for Demon's Souls to install? Why not fire up Astro's Playroom? It's free, it's there, and you know what else? It's pretty goddamn good. This is the formula that worked for Mario back in 1985, and now he's a Connects toy. Maybe if Astro is lucky, he can be a Mega Bloks one day. But of course, the execution is also critical. Whether Astro's Playroom is something you turn on and then close out of after 4 minutes, or something you play to completion, all depends on how good the game is. And thankfully, the game is really, really good. Being essentially a tech demo for the PlayStation 5, one duty Astro's Playroom has is showing off the power of the hardware. And on this front, it absolutely delivers. Visually, it's a gorgeous game, and displays the fact that the graphical power doesn't only benefit games with realistic art styles. The music is equally fantastic, with each track being a downright head bobber. But where Astro's Playroom really shines is the gameplay. At its core, Playroom is a very simple game. Astro has a basic attack, a hover jump, and a spin attack. Keep in mind, simple controls aren't necessarily a bad thing. It just means that the developer's priorities lie elsewhere, and here they lie with the level design. If we're going to make the parallels that Astro's Playroom has with Nintendo platformers, it's much closer to Super Mario Galaxy in 3D World than it is to Super Mario Sunshine and Odyssey. And that's not just thanks to its more linear nature, but also its focus on level design over the number of moves. While Playroom certainly isn't reinventing the wheel in terms of 3D platformers, it takes what works and refines it. Fun little jumping challenges, secrets hiding in the corners, and the enticement of collectibles rounds off Astro's Playroom into a tight, focused, enjoyable package. The foundation of the game is as rock solid as you can ask for, but there is something else built on top of this infrastructure: the abilities. Because Playroom's real purpose as a tech demo isn't so much for the PlayStation 5 console, it's for the DualSense controller. Even though gyro had been a thing for a while at the time the PS5 released, the DualSense's adaptive triggers and haptic feedback were a new area for video game peripherals. Introducing something new is often accompanied by a certain amount of fear, or at least apprehension. So what better way for Sony to win over a legion of players that hadn't seen any meaningful innovation since the DualShock than to attach these features to a new, high-quality, free 3D platformer? In video games, there's often a fine line between a feature and a gimmick, and these DualSense-centric abilities do stray into the gimmick territory a little too often. None overstay their welcome, but each time I come across one in Astro's Playroom, I go, oh man, I gotta do this now? Usually these sections are able to win me over, but that doesn't change the fact that I'm always relieved to get back to the regular platforming once I come to the end. To rank the abilities from worst to best, I'd go Spaceship, Monkey, Frog, Ball, Gun. The Spaceship, Monkey, and Frog are all focused around gyro, which has been a thing since the PS3 days, so I'm not impressed by it here. I like the ball ability mostly because it's fun to go really fast with, and then the gun is my favorite because it feels most integrated with the regular controls. So while the DualSense abilities might be the boldest part of Astro's Playroom, they're also the weakest. My thoughts on the DualSense features overall in this game range from, hey, this is pretty cool, to them feeling like a relic from the Nintendo DS era. The release of Astro's Playroom had many players clamoring for more. A free tech demo that proved that not only can a 3D platformer be made in this day and age, it can be universally acclaimed. Even though the 3D mascot platformer genre was largely dormant for about 2 decades, Astro's Playroom showed that there was still an appetite for it. A full-fledged game was the clear next step. So now we fast forward nearly 4 years to the eagerly awaited, uncompromised, and unsubtitled game Astro Bot. Astro Bot, developed by Team Asobi and published by Sony Interactive Entertainment, was released for the PlayStation 5 on September 6th, 2024. The game was directed by Nicolas Doucet, who might not be a well-known name in the gaming industry, but he's been around for quite a while. His early years were spent in quality assurance for various LEGO games, before joining Sony in 2005 for the title iToy Play 3. Now, I just want to say, PlayStation had a cool thing there with the iToy for a few years. I had one in the first iToy Play, and it was super fun. It was basically the Wii before the Wii. Nicolas Doucet also has a special thanks credit for Destruction All-Stars, so hey, that's something. But of course, the Astro Bot IP didn't start off with Astro's Playroom. Before that was Astro Bot Rescue Mission for PlayStation VR, and before that was the Playroom demo for the PS4 camera. So the history is definitely there, but I don't have a PSVR, a PlayStation camera, or a PS4, so I'm going to treat those games like the media treats the oppression of Palestinian citizens and gloss over it. Much like Astro's Playroom, Astro Bot is a linear 3D platform game. It's divided up into different worlds, each of which contains about 5 levels. Each course is full of items to collect, such as coins, puzzle pieces, bots, and PlayStation-themed characters known as VIP bots. There's also a hub world, which will become more populated as you progress through the game and rescue more robots. The story really doesn't matter, but if you want to hear it, Astro and the other bots are flying around in their PS5 spaceship until they run into an alien that rips the ship apart, causing Astro to need to venture through space to find the other robots and the missing ship parts. And now, please don't tell me I'm the only one who thinks that the main alien villain is green because he represents Xbox. Maybe it's a coincidence, but it's not a coincidence. Astro's core moveset remains the same as Playroom, that being a hover jump, a basic attack, and a spin attack. In most levels, Astro will acquire some sort of ability which is used to get to the end. It's in these abilities that Astro differs the most greatly from Astro's Playroom, and it's for the better. In Astro's Playroom, the abilities will completely take over and replace Astro's normal moveset. Astro doesn't gain new powers, he changes entirely, and you don't get access to his regular moves until you complete the part that requires use of the ability. This means that if you like the abilities, that's great, but if you don't, it can feel like you're stuck playing a part of a game that you don't enjoy in order to get back to the part that you actually like. The abilities in Astro Bot are still largely required in order to complete a level, but there's a key difference. That's the fact that these abilities are supplemental to Astro's moveset. Each one you acquire adds a new power, but it doesn't take away any of your existing ones. This means the levels can be tailored to and take advantage of these special abilities, but they don't need to be constricted by them. The climbing monkey ability might not be the most fun, but you aren't spending the entire level just doing that. You're climbing for short bursts in between the regular platform. It's thanks to this that the power-ups in Astro Bot are able to escape the feeling of being a gimmick that they often ran into in Astro's Playroom. There's no downside to getting any of them, and they're able to complement the rest of the level, rather than feeling separate from it. The Astro Bot game as a whole, especially thanks to how these abilities work, remind me a ton of another 3D platformer that released in 2024. I'll give you until the end of this sentence to guess what game I'm thinking of, because it's the one, the only, Princess Peach Showtime. Both games are linear 3D platformers with hidden collectibles, both have cute characters strewn throughout each level, both have fantastic soundtracks, and both have unique abilities that the protagonist uses to get to the end of each course. And I will say, I like Princess Peach Showtime a lot more than most other adult players. But to get back to Astro Bot, everything about the game exudes quality. All of the bots, even the generic ones that don't take after PlayStation characters, are charming and likable. You'll feel motivated to rescue them just based on how cute they are. This is especially true for Astro Bot himself, who's so full of personality, despite having a basic design. And I don't know if it's intentional, but the look of Astro very much reminds me of all those robot toys you'd see in the early 2000s, some of which were released by Sony. I do have to shout out the VIP bots, each of which represent a different character in PlayStation's history. There's all the heavy hitters, of course, Kratos, Joel and Ellie, Nathan Drake, but there's also more obscure characters. There's quite a few I don't recognize at all, but of the ones that do, I appreciate seeing them here, like the Prince from Katamari Damacy. That is such a good game, let me just say. Each of the characters has a unique animation and funny little description, which really shows how the developers are truly familiar with them. One of the other first things you'll notice about Astro Bot is the striking visuals. Even though it's not a realistic looking game, the power of the PS5 is really shown off well here. The environment's looking absolutely stunning. The lighting and shadows look great, the animations are well done, and the textures are all very high quality. There's also so many little objects to hit, which can be really fun to just mess around with. Even better than the graphics, though, is the music. The soundtrack was composed by Kenneth C.M. Young, who also composed for Astro's Playroom. But before that, he was known for his work on the Little Big Planet series. Notably, Young did not compose the soundtrack for Sackboy: A Big Adventure, to which I say, you can tell. I really can't say enough good things about the soundtrack. The music for each level is clearly tailored to it, but all tracks also fit perfectly together as a whole. And every single song is a banger. Even if you don't play the game, I recommend at least listening to the music. The soundtrack is truly all killer, no filler. All bop, no flop. All happy, no crappy. All great, no hate. All lit, no shit. I got plenty of these, don't even worry about it. And all these elements, the well-integrated abilities, the charming characters, the beautiful visuals, and the incredible soundtrack all come together to create an excellent package. And because of all this, Astro Bot is a great game. Now, I want you to remember the fact that I said that Astro Bot is a great game, because the next thing I'm about to say might rub you the wrong way if this is a game you really think highly of. And that is that while Astro Bot is a great game, it is not a very original game. In fact, I'd even say that I found the lack of new ideas in it pretty surprising. Because Astro Bot doesn't just pull characters in from PlayStation history, it pulls ideas in from every corner of video games. I'm not talking about the simple fact that it's a 3D platformer when so many of those have already been made, even if they're not the dominant genre now. In this area, Astro Bot is actually pretty unique. It's 3D with full camera movement, but it's also linear, which is something that's not seen all that often. Most 3D platformers with a fully controllable camera will be more open-ended, without a definitive start and finish at each level. These are games like Super Mario Odyssey, Banjo-Kazooie, and Ape Escape. 3D platformers that are linear more often have a fixed camera, like Super Mario 3D World, Kirby and the Forgotten Land, or Sackboy: A Big Adventure. So the general structure of the levels in Astro Bot, while maybe not completely unprecedented, is far outside of the norm, to which I give the game credit. But I'm not talking about the general structure that's unoriginal. I'm talking about everything else inside it. For one, you have the level themes, which range from so generic they're basically required for a 3D platformer to seemingly original. The first category comprises the majority of the main levels. You have your grass levels, desert levels, snow levels, beach levels, ancient ruins levels, jungle levels, underwater levels, cave levels, spooky levels. They're all there. None of these are bad ideas for a level in a video game, but that's exactly the problem. We've seen these same environments time and time again, even outside of 3D platformers. So how long does it take for these archetypes to go from classic to stale? For me, there's only so many pyramid-themed levels I can play before I get sick of them altogether. And then there's the levels that I've called seemingly original, because that's precisely what they are. These are levels outside of the types we normally see, but have still been done by many other high-profile games. Creamy Canyon is a snow level with an ice cream aesthetic, which seems pretty fresh, until you realize it's been done from Kirby to Sonic to Mario Kart. Trunk of Funk, where you go inside a giant tree, also seems pretty cool, but that idea has already been in a million different Legend of Zelda games. Bathhouse Battle has a very nice Japanese dojo theme, which has already been in Mario 3D World, Super Mario Odyssey, and Paper Mario: The Origami King. Slow-Mo Casino is, as you can probably guess, a casino level, which has been done in so many Sonic games. Balloon Breeze is a garden in the sky, just like Gusty Garden Galaxy from Super Mario Galaxy. And Luna Sola features gravity switching, which is the entire premise of Super Mario Galaxy. I don't give these examples to say that there are no original level ideas in Astro Bot, but there were definitely fewer than I expected. The ones that are original stand out as highlights, like Construction Derby. I don't think I've ever seen a construction site themed level in a platformer, except for maybe the original Donkey Kong if you want to go back that far. And I think Construction Derby shows where Astro Bot missed an opportunity, which was to have more urban themed environments. Across the landscape of platformers, there's not a ton of city-based levels. There's New Donk City and a handful from older Sonic games, but not much else. So I think Astro Bot should have leaned into this more. Every creature and enemy is a robot already, so they'd fit in well in man-made environments. This is why I got really excited when starting the level for the World 1 boss, Mighty Chewy. I thought I was getting a cool futuristic cyberpunk level, but it only turned out to be a short platforming segment before the boss fight. But the borrowing of ideas doesn't just happen with the level themes, it also happens with Astro Bot's abilities. The Octo Balloon is basically the balloon power-up from Super Mario World and 64DS, or even Blimp Yoshi from Super Mario Galaxy 2. The Twin Frog Gloves are just the main hook of arms. The Elephant Backpack is essentially the Cloud Suit from Super Mario Galaxy 2. The Sponge form is the same as the Water Balloon ability from Kirby and the Forgotten Land. The Chicken Jetpack is the Rocket Nozzle from Super Mario Sunshine. The Hamster Suit is the Morph Ball from Metroid Prime. The Loco Roco Ball is the Rolling Ball from Super Mario Galaxy, or the whole idea behind Kirby Tilt and Tumble. So even though all of these level themes and abilities are well executed, you can't deny the fact that so many are clearly borrowed ideas from other games. You might make the argument that maybe the Astro Bot team did come up with these ideas all on their own, they just never played those games, so it's just a coincidence that these mechanics have been done before. And I would be inclined to agree with you. After all, the idea of turning into a balloon or having a jetpack that shoots you up in the air wouldn't require a creative mastermind to come up with. So I would be inclined to agree with you if Astro Bot wasn't packed full of 30 years of PlayStation history. There's an incredible attention to detail with these references, the kind that's only possible due to a deep knowledge of the games behind them. Astro Bot was clearly made by a team of developers with a love for games. So am I supposed to believe that that love extends only to the PlayStation franchises included here? Obviously not. There's no way the developers know about Boku from Boku no Natsu Yasumi, but don't know about the Morph Ball. To go back to the Princess Peach Showtime comparison, when you look at both games, Peach is the one with more original ideas. The whole concept of each level being a theater production is new, if you don't count some very light theming from Super Mario Bros. 3. The abilities Peach gets are also more inventive. Yeah, there's the basic ones like Sword Fighter, Cowgirl, and Ninja, but many of them push boundaries that Astro Bot doesn't even attempt to come near. Detective, Patissiere, and Mermaid Peach change what the game is entirely, and the Thief, Figure Skater, and superhero outfits are totally unexpected and super creative. But even though Astro Bot is not a very original game, that doesn't mean it's a bad game. Remember, I said earlier it's a great game, which it is. This is because it elevates itself through its execution. As I said before, the visuals are beautiful, the music is terrific, and the characters are lovable. But on top of all that, there's a few things that Astro Bot does especially well, more so than 99% of other games. The first is the dialogue, or really the lack thereof. Aside from the level titles and VIP bot descriptions, you'll hardly see a single written word throughout the entire game. No pop-up dialogue, no stopping the game to explain the story, and no 5-page tutorials. The commitment to this lack of text is beyond impressive. It certainly would have been easy to have instructions boxes pop up explaining the hub world or the layout of the levels, but it's not needed, so it's not there. This is so refreshing in an era where all other studios feel the need to constantly explain and handhold the player through every little thing. Astro Bot is not the first game to feature a lack of text, but for a PlayStation first-party AAA major release, it's unheard of, which is what makes it all the more remarkable. The next thing that Astro Bot does particularly well is something I don't believe there's an official name for, but is what I call contextual level design. I've spoken about this in past videos, but I would define it as the idea of designing level geometry that makes sense within the context of the game's world. For example, this means instead of having platforms that float in the air for no reason, they should be suspended by something that makes sense thematically. Super Mario Sunshine is an example of a game with great contextual level design, because each setting in it informs what type of level geometry it will have. So, like Mario Sunshine, this is something that Astro Bot does very well. The game consists of largely floating platforms, yes, but there's context behind almost all of them. Maybe they're mountains that are so tall they're above the clouds, or islands in the ocean, or cliffs inside of a very deep cave. Even a level like Slow-Mo Casino, which does feature mostly floating islands with no context behind them, does a great job with using the casino theme to inform what the player will be interacting with. You're jumping on poker chips, cards, darts, and roulette wheels, which all come together to fully deliver on the casino setting. The lack of contextual level design is a trap that a lot of platformers end up falling into, because the art style tends to require it less. A hyper-realistic game will demand realistic environments, so the levels that the players navigate through need to fit in with what the setting is. The more abstract you get, the easier it is to disregard the need for things to make sense. But if nothing makes sense, then what's the point of any of it? If you're going to have your courses consisting of floating blocks in an endless void, why bother giving them different colors or textures at all? So this is something that Astro Bot does well, and I very much appreciate it for that. Another level where the game's contextual level design particularly shines is Downsized Surprise. What's great about it is that this is where the environment and Astro's ability are most closely connected. The main ability here is to shrink down to the size of a mouse, which might not be the most original idea, but it's extremely well executed here. The camera focuses only on Astro Bot, blurring everything else, which does a great job of selling how big everything is in comparison. But the level design is really where this course shines. When shrinking down, everything Astro jumps on has a context within the level, like leaves and flowers, inside of a tree stump, or on the hands of a clock. Becoming small is not something new for games, like Tiny Huge Island from Super Mario 64. But what makes it so much better than Tiny Huge Island is the fact that it uses real-life objects to deliver on the concept. Rather than the Goomba was small, now the Goomba is big. It's the same situation with the slow motion power-up in levels like Slow-Mo Casino. Again, slowing down time is something that's been done in video games many times before, but it's how it's done here that makes it so great. The way you can use the power to create platforming opportunities that weren't there before is so well done. Stopping time and taking out a group of enemies makes you feel like Quicksilver from the X-Men. One small detail that makes a big difference here is the fact that when you hit an enemy, they fly away quickly at first, but then slow down in the air. This makes the hits feel much more impactful and empowering. So it's with these abilities in particular that Astro Bot is able to take something we're already familiar with and present it in a way that feels like it's never been done before. These are the abilities that do it the best, but they all do it to some degree, which is how Astro Bot is able to wear its influences on its sleeve, but still feel fresh. Because despite my thoughts that the game isn't very original, it doesn't feel like a game I've already played before. It feels like a melting pot of ideas from 30 years of 3D platformers. It's like a song that samples an older song in a unique way, to stand on its own as an individual piece of art, but to also give you an appreciation for the source material. For instance, the song Dreamin' of the Past by Pusha T, off of his album It's Almost Dry. The song heavily samples the beginning of Jealous Guy by Donny Hathaway, which is a cover of the John Lennon song of the same name. So the song is a sample of a cover, but it's still its own independent work. And there's a couple of lines in Dreamin' from the Past that perfectly sum up the way I feel about Astro Bot. Walk it down like Brady, gets better with time. Didn't have to reinvent the wheel, just a better design. So being a fairly new franchise for Sony, you have to wonder what the future will hold for Astro Bot. For this individual game, its emphasis on the PS5 hardware and the special treatment towards characters from more currently popular series will make it show its age more than other games of its type. In 10 or 20 years, when we're on to the PlayStation 8, Astro Bot is going to feel like a much older game than others that have even come out before it. But I actually see this as a good thing. The time capsule aspect of Astro Bot really makes it unique, and I think it'll be fun to look back on it in the years to come. Imagine if there was a PlayStation 2 equivalent of Astro Bot, which shined a big light on the PS2 hardware and starred the characters from that generation, like the OG Kratos. That's a game that would be so much fun to go back to now, and get a glimpse into what that era of gaming was like. Even though Astro relies heavily on nostalgia now, it's well set up to become nostalgic itself. So I think Astro Bot the game is going to age quite a bit, but it's going to age very well. The Astro Bot franchise is a bit of a tougher question. It's obvious that a big amount of the hype leading into the release of this game was a result of the inclusion of the VIP bots. They played a major focus in the game's marketing, such as the free updates to Astro's Playroom that added more of them. And they are cool to see and fun to find, but I can't help but think you can only pull this trick so many times. While Astro's Playroom did have the VIP bots, the focus was more on the PlayStation hardware, which the developers have put less emphasis on in this game. And this was smart. There's only so many times you can get excited from finding the SingStar microphone, so it made sense to shift attention towards PlayStation games rather than the hardware. But I can't help but feel like we've hit the nostalgic limit with Astro Bot. Would finding a robot dressed as Solid Snake hit the same the third time? Probably not. At one point in the development, the studio had considered omitting the VIP bots from the game, but because they knew fans would be disappointed, they opted to push the concept even further, including over 150 of the legacy characters, plus levels fully based on other PlayStation games. And while I wouldn't disagree that doubling down on nostalgia was the right move for this game, it does put the developers in an increasingly difficult position the further they go with it. If Astro Bot 2 comes out and doesn't feature any references to past PlayStation games, the tonal whiplash will be even greater than it would have been if they had gone with this approach for this game. Maybe the inevitable Astro Bot sequel will triple down on the callbacks, and only have levels based off of other PlayStation games. I won't deny that these courses were highlights, especially the Ape Escape one. As a die-hard Ape Escape fan, I was thrilled to see the series get the treatment it did in Astro Bot. My PlayStation user icon is a Pippo monkey, for God's sakes. I'm dedicated to this. But the deeper Astro Bot wades into PlayStation history, the more it becomes hampered by it. If the development team's ambition for Astro Bot is to be able to walk alongside the series as it references so heavily, it's going to have to be able to stand on its own, which Nicolas Doucet is aware of. If Astro Bot is going to fill the long empty role of PlayStation's mascot, he needs to have his own identity. That's exactly the trap that Sackboy fell into when he served as the de facto mascot. He went from being front and center on the cover of PlayStation All-Stars Battle Royale to being a relic of the past, with no clear future besides cameos in Astro Bot. Since release, Astro Bot has been hailed as gaming's metallic messiah of sorts, a holy redeemer sent down from digital heaven to rescue us from the inferno of live service, battle pass, microtransaction-ridden games that have plagued the industry for far too long. And while I think some of these statements are hyperbolic, they may not be incorrect. Astro Bot is a product of decades of gaming history, from the heavy-handed nostalgia to the classic-level archetypes to the clearly inspired abilities. It's a game that reflects dozens of other games that came before it, but now maybe it's able to turn the mirror around and influence future titles just as much as it's been influenced by past titles. It's both a relic and a blueprint. The destiny of Astro Bot is uncertain, but hopeful. Will Astro Bot mark a turning point for the AAA industry and deliver us into the gaming promised land? We'll just have to wait and see.